Good morning. Welcome to this meeting this morning. Can I start off with introducing the top table? On my far left, your far right, is Councillor Liz Barrett, the Vice Convener. On my immediate left is Barbara Renton, Executive Director of Communities. And on my right-hand side is Adam Taylor, Democratic Committee Services. I will now ask Adam to confirm any apologies received and take a roll call of members in attendance. Adam.
Thanks, Convener. Morning all. We've had no formal apologies for the meeting today. All members are actually present in the chambers with exception of Councillor Kogali. So I'll just ask Councillor Kogali to confirm that he's actually online.
Yes, I am, and I can hear you.
Thank you. So yeah, all members present, Convener.
Thank you, Adam. Just remember, people, please make sure all mobile phones and that are switched off. And can I ask you just to either in the room put your hand up, attract my attention, or for Noah, just put a message in the chat, please. Can I ask if there's any declaration of interest in respect of any of the items on the agenda this morning? Thank you. Just item 3 for the minute. Can we agree the minute from the last meeting held on the 27th of November 2023? Councillor Lane.
Thanks. I have a question on the minute, because in the minute in point 7, after the amendment, the officers were instructed to investigate the potential for this project to be funded through the budget process and to report back to this meeting. I was wondering if we have an update.
Thank you. Can I ask Barbara, could you take that, please? Thank you.
Happy to provide a verbal update in terms of that. So officers continue to look at the costs, including the construction costs, but also the costs that we would require to support that in terms of staffing. And we would intend to, sort of take any of that information through BRG groups.
Okay, thank you. Just for clarity, there is a potential for this project to be funded through the budget process.
There is, sort of officers maintain that cuts across, sort of, as you understand, Councillor Lang, the national position, but, sort of there is the potential.
Councillor Lane, I sense you want to come back in again.
Yeah, for clarity, the national position and how we look after our residents, I think should lie in our gift, and we shouldn't be looking at areas that have been flooded 3 times in 3 months and telling them to wait for 10 years because it's a national position. So I just want to stress that the officers take that on board. Thanks.
Thank you. Noted. Can we move on to item 4, please? Sorry. With that, just confirm that we are happy to accept the minute the way that is with the verbal update. Can we move on to item 4, please? Can I welcome Pat Taggart to the council and his first climate change and sustainability meeting. Pat Taggart is taken over as fleet manager, and can I ask you to introduce the report, Pat, please?
Morning, everyone. That's it now. Yeah. Okay, good morning, everyone. Sorry for that wee shaky start there with the mics, usual technology. Thanks very much.
Can we just give a wee sorry, Pat, but we've got some feedback. Has someone accidentally switched mic on somewhere? Mic on the computer, somebody?
Shall we swap mics? Yeah, possibly. Okay, is that any better? Okay, yeah, right. Okay, thanks very much. So copies of the report have obviously been sent out to everyone. So what I intend to do is go over the kind of content just to give you the overview of that. Firstly, starting with the background to the report itself. You'll see that there is UK government guidance now in place when all trying to achieve the targets by 2050, and also by changing the way that vehicles are operated on our roads by 2035 and moving to alternatively fuelled vehicles for that purpose. Scottish targets specifically refer to the change of vehicles less than 3.5 tonnes to move to alternative fuels by 2025, and the rest of the fleet and the HGV fleet by 2030. There is a number of significant challenges that will exist in relation to doing that at the moment, and we'll come on and we'll discuss that as part of this report. Moving on to the current technology, I've tried to give a flavour of the cost implications in this process as well, and it's specified that in relation to the purchase of a refuse collection vehicle, for example, is 225,000, but for an electric equivalent, it's going to be in the region of 450,000, and hydrogen thereafter is more expensive in the region of £750,000. We are continuing to closely monitor the developments in relation to new technologies as we progress with the hopeful change of the PKC fleet. In relation to Perth and Kinross itself, putting that into context, you'll see that fleet does make up quite a significant number of tonnage of CO2 per annum. It's 6.7% of the council overall, and consideration needs to be given to the way that the council operates its fleet in the future as well. From a personal perspective, as fleet manager, it's important for me to be able to make sure that I'm actually networking and aware of what other local authorities are doing. And I do that through a number of different streams. I've mentioned a couple of them there through the Association of Public Service Excellence, where all transport managers in Scotland all meet to discuss the different aspects of what's going on within their own council fleet and how they're trying to make improvements. The Energy Savings Trust as well are another area that we do go to for advice in relation to providing different reports for us, and I know that's been done in the past. There was a report done by a firm of consultants, Urban Foresight, who are specialists in the field in relation to the electric vehicle transition, and they have provided us with some guidance in relation to how they would see these changes come about. These will be picked up later on in the report as well. One of the main things that I would be looking to doing is that in order to support any future developments is to create an electric vehicle charging hub over at Inverarmond area, in order that it would support our fleet to move and do what it needs to do in order to provide the services that we do in the council overall. In relation to hydrogen technology, you will also see that planning permission has been granted for the site at the Bin Eco Park with the Green Cat hydrogen. This is expected to be in place within the next 3 years, and that will help to shape as well any future transition that we may consider in relation to hydrogen. There is also a further proposal for a hydrogen facility at Broxton roundabout, which is encouraging news because it's obviously key locations within the PKC area in general. Moving on to the current fleet, try to provide you with an overview of the vehicles involved there. We currently have around 452 vehicles. You'll see that based upon the numbers that are provided, there's around 372 the vehicles that are in that kind of less than 3.5 tonne bracket. albeit even the technology in those areas still needs to be developed further before we would transition with some of them. But we are still looking at an excess of 300 vehicles to change over if that's the decision that's made at this committee. The PKC progress in comparison with other local authorities. So whilst we do have less than 10% of the fleet already changed over to electric, there are a number of local authorities that are at different stages with that. So we are in some cases no different, albeit we may be behind the curve with some of the authorities that surround us as well. Funding is a significant issue, and trying to progress towards the 2030 deadline. And it's now the case that there is less funding coming through the Scottish Government and also Energy Savings Trust, who are managing that. That is the feedback that I've been given so far, that there is no other funding to support us with the infrastructure side of things. Options for moving forward. Whilst there are a number of options that we've noted there from point 4.21, however, based on the information that's outlined, the advice from the consultants and officers is recommending the adoption of a two-phased approach, depending on the size of vehicles. So the cars and vans, for example, that are under 3.5 tonnes would form part of phase 1 of that programme between 2025 and 2030. And the options around that for the heavier vehicles would then progress thereafter. And again, that would allow us to continue to maintain and look out for the advancing technology that would be available. However, at 4.24, in the meantime, as part of that transition, the recommendation is that we consider decarbonising our fleet with the use of hydro-treated vegetable oil, or HVO as it's referred to, and that would be as an alternative to diesel vehicles that would be put into the heavier fleet that we use. This would allow the council to reduce its CO2 emissions overall by the use of that fuel, as it is a green fuel that we would be using in order to do that. It would provide an estimated CO2 reduction of around 725 tonnes, and that's based upon the calculation around the use of a refuse collection vehicle and on its daily routes. In order to support that approach, an initial 3-month trial would be requested with that fleet. And that would allow the council to have a more informed view of whether this should be rolled out across the general RCV fleet and moving forward. Moving on to the options for transitioning cars and light vehicles under 3.5 tonnes, you will see that there are a number of options that we've put in this report. The first one being at point 4.29, the 2 to 3 year accelerated transition programme. This was based upon the Urban Foresight report that I mentioned earlier, and their recommendation was that if you were to do this on a quick basis, 2 to 3 years, this could, however, represent a high risk and a high cost approach, because what you'd be doing is trying to change these 330 plus vehicles within that shorter period of time. A key requirement of any transition strategy is ensuring that there is adequate charging network and infrastructure in order to make that work, which adds to the complication of trying to do this on that 2 to 3 year period. The cost and availability of electric vehicles are and still remain to be a challenge. Electric vehicles are still generally more expensive than petrol or diesel equivalent. And then I suppose until such times as they would reduce, it would certainly make the whole transition that bit easier. The 5-year transition programme to replace the diesels with electric. This option would be to transition the council's fleet and to electric over a 5-year period. This is a lower risk approach, and it does allow us for more time for the necessary charging infrastructure to be developed and installed. and it is considered a more realistic transition period, and that would be in line with our normal vehicle replacement programme and cycle. This approach would allow the fleet staff to look at the required infrastructure in order to support that transition as well. This is the kind of preferred option that we would ask elected members to consider as part of this committee process. And continuing the next one about continuing for the foreseeable future with the current approach of largely purchasing diesel and petrol vehicles, in other words, the status quo and do nothing. That would mean that we would merely continue with the vehicle replacement programme as is and only purchase petrol or diesel vehicles. However, this would be contrary to the Council's climate change commitments, albeit it is a lower cost approach and low risk from a service delivery perspective as well. So given the above and what I've just said there, this is not the proposed route that we would ask to take in relation to this report. So the proposal recommendations at section 5 would ask that there's a two-phased approach should be adopted with regard to the transitioning of the council fleet to the low emission vehicles, with the vehicles being less than 3.5 tonnes in order to do that, and make that the first phase, and larger vehicles will form part of a second phase as part of a transitioning progress. For the larger vehicles, we would also ask in addition that we introduce the HVO or hydrotreated vegetable oil as an alternative to diesel for the council's refuse collection vehicles, and allow us to do a 3-month trial for that. And for the cars and light vehicles under 3.5 tonnes, move then to the electric vehicle over a 5-year period. So in conclusion, whilst it is important that the fleet decarbonisation strategy for the council reflects both the Scottish Government guidance in terms of alternatively fuelled vehicles and our own aspirations and policies in respect of climate change, the proposal is the approach should be to initially focus on the vehicles that are less than 3.5 tonnes as a first phase, and to maintain a watching brief with the larger vehicles overall. However, the report also notes that the transition to HVO fuel from diesel within the council's refuse collection vehicles on a phased basis should be introduced as well, and we'll start that with a 3-month trial and see how that progresses with us as well. This would allow us to make significant reductions in relation to the council's CO2 emissions overall. Thanks.
Thank you for that, Pat. Already got a few questions in. Can we start with Angus, your first question?
Thanks, Convener. Pat, thank you for that report, and welcome to Perth Kinross Council. I have to say I find it a bit awkward. We used to have officers over there where we could actually look at people. It's a little bit awkward speaking to people with my back to them, so apologies for that. I understand why you've made this recommendation for this two-phased approach. I'm interested in the do-nothing approach that some of the other councils are looking at. And what I'm trying to get to, and hopefully this question will make sense to you, I'm going to suggest my answer to the question. That might be a faster way to get to where I want to go. I have this feeling that if we move over to EVs, we'll get a very small reduction in our output of CO2 at quite a substantial cost. And although you've given us the costs differential for a refuse vehicle, I don't see the differential costs for cars and small vans. So can you maybe just start by giving me your thoughts on the do-nothing approach and my particular question about will we get a very small reduction in carbon output for quite a substantial financial cost to the council?
Right, Pat, you want to come in with that?
Okay, so to address the way that the vehicles are and the reduction in CO2, it does vary depending on the size of the vehicle, as you know. If you move from a diesel vehicle to an electric vehicle, it goes from some emissions of CO2 to actually no emissions of CO2 for the vehicle. However, there will still be a smaller element of CO2 in the running of the electric vehicles because they need to be charged up, and that's where the CO2 does come in with that. And I suppose overall it's about trying to address the climate emergency and trying to ensure that the council is following that sort of thought process as to reduce the CO2 overall. Fleet, whilst we see is around 7% of the CO2 overall for the council, but there still needs to be some approach made in order to reduce the CO2 overall with the running of the fleet, because it's still quite a significant number of emissions that's coming from the fleet.
Please.
Thanks for that, Pat. So I'm making an assumption here, so tell me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that the largest chunk of that 6% or 6.8% is coming from things like refuse vehicles and HGVs and stuff like that. Are you able to give us an indication if I'm right about that, or are you able to tell me what the smaller vehicles would contribute to that CO2 emission?
Yeah, that's right. The larger fleet is the biggest pollutant that we have by way of CO2, and the smaller fleet, but the smaller fleet is high in numbers. So we only have around 80 HGVs, but the rest of the fleet is made up with smaller fleets. So when you look at how that collectively adds up, it's a significant amount of CO2 for that smaller size of fleet as well.
I do have more questions, but I'll maybe just give someone else a shot. Thanks.
Thanks. I think just in this as well, just bear in mind that the small fleet stuff is nearly 25% of the carbon footprint, and we do have a commitment to hit net zero. So I think just is important that we do take cognizance of the fact that, you know, we have made a commitment to get to net zero and cutting just under a quarter of our CO2 footprint with small car vehicles is a preferred.
I agree, Convener, but as Pat said, there's still CO2 output just in the charging of the vehicles, because that electricity has to come from somewhere. So I don't think we'll ever get to net zero in that regard, because there'll always be some kind of output.
Absolutely, and that's why we've got to bring a lot more in where we're getting the energy from and where it's getting generated from, and that's another project within the council. Thanks. Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I was going to say that, as you've pointed out, the cars and light vehicles are about a quarter of the CO2 of the whole fleet. So I think it's around 600-700 tonnes. Councillor Forbes asked a question about cost. The costs aren't detailed in the report, the financial implications, largely because, you know, electric vehicles are dearer. I think we all know that, but the cost of the vehicles are coming down, and also it would depend on in terms of how many we bought at what time, etc., and the pace of change. Also, at the moment, there isn't any government grants available, but hopefully that position will change. So the vehicles are dearer, but as you say, the cars and light vehicles are about a quarter of the CO2 emissions. So if the fleet's 6.7% of the whole council's output, it would be around 2% of the council's CO2 emissions reduced if we move to the electric vehicles for those cars and light vehicles or light vans.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Lane Grant.
Thanks. There's just if Mr. Taggart could clarify where he said that, you know, the charging of the vehicles would be contributing to CO2. If we, as we're gradually moving away from fossil fuels to produce energy, and we've got wind power, solar power, and other means to produce the electricity required to charge up the vehicles, surely that would mean that there would be very little CO2 produced in the charging of the vehicles as we move forward. just for clarity, it was following on
Yeah,
Councillor
so-
Forbes' question.
Absolutely, certainly minimises, and I'm going to let Pat come in and comment on that, Pat.
Okay, thanks. I mentioned in the report earlier there about how we were looking at a charging hub over in Inverarmond, and that would be the kind of thought process would be around having solar canopies there, whereby we would capture the additional power and we'd have battery storage. So therefore, there would and hopefully could be a net zero effect. However, we need to consider that some of the infrastructure will be put in places where that won't always be possible with the solar canopies to support that because of the cost implications. So yes is the answer, that we would be looking at battery storage in some cases, but not in all cases.
So that wasn't my question, it was just for clarity, really. I was clarifying Councillor Forbes' comment.
Right, okay, I'll let you
Can
come
I
in.
have my actual question now? It's I was just wanting to ask officers how rigid the two-stream approach is. If, as was stated there, the Bin Farm site, which is going to produce hydrogen, is already under construction, it will be ready within 3 years because their contract is to start using it within 3 years when it was signed, I believe. So that would be, say, 26, 27, it should be operational, the energy from incineration plant. And I think that ties in with the hydrogen being produced. I think we'd be looking to enter in a contract with them because our bin lorries, if you want to call that, heavy goods vehicle ones going up there to deposit the waste, it would be ideal if they were then charging there again, because as you've said before and in the report, that electric vehicles, because the topography of Perth and Kinross won't be suitable for doing all sorts, and we have to look at hydrogen. So my question is it rigid, this will not look till after 2030 moving forward, when there possibly will be hydrogen production there in 27, 28?
Thank you. Mark, you're going to come in and answer this one.
Yeah, thanks, Kabina. The proposals aren't rigid at all. I think, as you know, we've already discussed, the cost of electric vehicles or alternative fuel low emission vehicles is quite significant at the moment. So we don't want to find ourselves in a situation where we're purchasing vehicles which ultimately aren't efficient or aren't of best use. So we feel comfortable with the cars and light vehicles that electric is the way forward, and we're looking for support from members today to move forward with that. In terms of the larger vehicles, it is maintaining that watch and brief. So if the technology improves in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months time, we will bring a report back to maybe change our plans. So it's not set in stone by any means, and I would imagine we will bring annual updates to the committee anyway, and we'll be reporting on how the technology is changing and how potentially our plans are changing. So absolutely not rigid. We just feel safe that we can go with the cars and light vehicles at this point, but not just yet with the larger vehicles. Thanks, Kabina.
Thank you. Can I just let Barbara Renton come in here?
Thank you, convener. The report makes reference to how we would keep all of the technology and the, sort of the way that the market changes and the technology changes under review, and look to change our approach as necessary.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for that clarity.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, scrolling up the list. Noah, you're next.
Hi, thank you very much for that report. I'm assuming from the debate that we've had so far that we don't have any numbers, especially for the first two options, I suppose, of the cost per tonne of carbon reduction. That feels like quite an important thing if we can even get an estimate on that number for both of those, just in terms of the actual case for change. I'm assuming we don't have that from what's been spoken about so far, but I thought I'd ask anyway.
There will be a financial side that will come forward at a later date. I don't know if Nigel or Pat or somebody wants to comment on the next steps. No, I'm just quite happy to leave that there will be a financial, they will be looking at the finances now going forward, and there will be a report coming back later this year to look at the actual costs with everything. And at that point, I would hope to see that kind of breakdown. Looking at the CO2 benefits against the actual costs of actually the fleet management decarbonisation programme as it gets finalised and detailed out. So, Angus, you want to come in with a point of clarification?
Yeah, just to follow up on what you said there, convener. So what we're approving today then, is this just to say go ahead and work out the numbers and then come back, or is this to say go ahead and do the project? Because I'm now a little bit more confused, because you said there was another report coming back with the finances.
Yeah, to look at the actual detail of the upgrade programme, which for the small vehicles, which will go for 5 years, this report will allow the HVO element to go ahead literally immediately. And so my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Pat, but basically for that, if approved at committee, all we need to do is to wait until one of the diesel tanks is empty, fill it with HVO, and then we can start running the 3-month trial. And then as long as there's no issues with that, we can then move on as a council to all the refuse collecting vehicles running on vegetable oil. And there's quite a good carbon saving from that perspective with little financial cost.
Yeah, I get that. That's great. I'm really pleased to see that. But what I'm asking about is the smaller stuff, because I thought if we go with the officer's recommendation, we're saying yes, just go ahead and do it. But your response to Noah was that there's another report coming back that gives us the finance, because I'm interested in that finance cost, carbon output cost, and the two together. And that's what I'm not able to grasp. But when you've just said there's another report due to come back, then I think my question is, if we say go ahead, do the officers go ahead, or do they just go away and work out the numbers and come back and we say, yeah, we like that, or no, we don't?
I think my understanding, and I think as Fraser coming in with this one, my understanding is that this will give the direction of travel as such, and then the actual numbers and the actual upgrade programme will then effectively be worked out in considerably more detail. Fraser, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, convener. So my understanding today is that the committee are approving the strategy. As you say, there will be financial implications associated with that shift. Clearly, Pat has set out, and there are additional costs to moving to the electric fleet. So we will need to consider that, as this committee doesn't have the authority to make that decision, if you like, in terms of the financial aspects. So we would need to pick that up through either Finance and Resources Committee or indeed through the budget process. So I think today we are approving the overall strategy and approach, and from here we'll need to formulate the figures that have been set out. Clearly those are moving. Again, Pat has described the market and the fact that the cost of these vehicles is greater than diesel and petrol vehicles, but hopefully that will start to reduce as we go forward. So we need to consider that in terms of borrowing costs, in terms of the maintenance of these vehicles, etc., going forward. So today, my understanding is we're dealing with the strategy, and we can bring back the financial consequences of that here, but we can't approve that, if you like, in terms of that. That's a council position or for FNR.
Yeah, please go ahead, Angus. If it's on the same, just to follow on, yeah.
Thanks, Fraser. So just if I grasp this correctly, so we're going to go off and look at this. I understand that we don't have the authority in this committee to make decisions about money, but it would have been helpful if we'd had that money aspect in this paper, so we could then say, okay, this is the strategy. We understand another committee makes the final decision on the money, but it would have been useful to have that breakdown. And is there any way, I presume we can't get that now, we're just going to have to make a decision with or without that?
Yep, I think again we're looking at hopefully what's set out in the paper is the bigger picture here, and cost is a significant factor in all of this, but the deliverability of the strategy is equally important. So what we have in terms of our local infrastructure, in particular, charging and the grid capacity to be able to deal with the power elements, that's going to be driving a lot of the cost elements as well. So it's not just about the cost of the vehicles. I think we need to be clearly we're looking at the wider implications as we move forward with all of our decarbonisation. Sorry. So I think it's a fair point in terms of the report itself, but it's a direction of travel in line with the climate action plan and the UK government government targets.
Thank you. Noah, do you have a point of clarification?
Well, I suppose it's essentially I would like just a bit more clarification about what we are actually asking for now. Has that work been done already and we're just not being shown it, or are we going to get it at some future undefined date after making a decision?
Not an undefined date, but the financial side will be worked out. Once the strategy is approved, officers will move to provide a lot of the detail, including the financial side, and that the commitment with that is to have that by the end of in the autumn, I believe, but certainly within this calendar year. Barbara wants to come in with this.
I think that there are a number of things as well, Councillor Kigali. The council has already undertaken a big review of its grey fleet. So that's the vehicles that we use to move our staff about to meetings, to visit clients, etc., etc. There is another part of that and a second phase of that where we will look to reduce those the amount of vehicles that we have. We're looking at putting vehicles closer to where our staff work, and that's linked to the electrification and the opportunities for charging points. So there is a big review of the number of vehicles that we need to do as well, to make sure that we have got the most effective, most efficient and the best way to source and resource our fleet as well. So it's not as simple as you're making a decision here and therefore the number should have been here, because there's a number of things that we're putting together. What we're seeking here is approval to move towards the purchase of electric vehicles in line with the targets that we've set within the council's approved climate action plan. Understanding that that is, sort of complex, but we need to have that agreement so that we can do some of that costing work, because if we do, so there's a bit of, we don't want to do that work unless there is an agreed approach through the strategy.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Noah?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, it's fine.
Thank you. Thank you. And Andrew, the next question.
Thank you very much, Convener. Can I say that I'm fully supportive of the general direction of the proposals we have in front of us here today, and mention has been made of the capital cost of electric vehicles. Can I just say that my own experience of a light electric vehicle is that the maintenance, servicing and running costs are considerable savings compared with a petrol or diesel one. So I think that needs to be factored into the equation as well. But my question is, are we over the 5-year period? Of course, we will still have petrol and diesel vehicles available as part of the pool in diminishing number. But are we considering keeping what you might call a strategic reserve, a small number of petrol and diesel vehicles? Because I do have a concern that some of our geography and some of our weather is not conducive to electric vehicles in the extreme. And also I retain a concern that unless we have our own robust generation facility for electricity, then we become very vulnerable to catastrophic general or localized failure of the grid system. And I think at this stage that needs to be taken into account. Thanks.
That was. I'm not sure if that was one question or two questions, but they were both good. But they're both good. Pat, do you want to answer both these? Thanks.
Yes, thanks. Yeah, that's where the whole measured approach needs to come into play there. We can't just change every single vehicle because as has been mentioned before about the way that the geography is within PKC, we need to be mindful of the way that our businesses are being supported for the communities in the delivery of those services. So what works for one particular service right across the board might not work right across the board for everyone else. So we will be keeping some of the diesel vehicles in the meantime until we get to that particular stage where we are more comfortable with the EV approach overall.
Thank you. Was there a second question over the charging side, or are you quite happy? I thought you'd kind of covered a bit about the ability for where the charging was coming from, so we don't put pressure on the grid.
No, I think the answer takes into account the points I was making. Thanks.
Thank you. Jack.
Thank you, convener. And again, I commend the council for moving at pace while being pragmatic with the climate challenge. I've got 3 very brief questions, very brief.
Are they related?
Absolutely related, yeah. First question is, and we may not get this just now, what is the average cost per mile of council vehicles using diesel and using electricity? Question 1. There are 80 commercial vehicles over 3,500 tonnes, which basically derive half of the carbon produced by the vehicle fleet. Of what proportion of that is going to be reduced by moving to HVO with the refuse vehicles? And the third very quick question is, HVO as a fuel is a good fuel as a transition fuel, but there are different types of HVO fuel. Some are sourced from palm oil. Can I get some assurance that we're going to take oil from a supplier that's part of the Renewable Fuel Assurance Scheme? Thank you.
Pat, and on the last one, it was the very first question I asked, I think, when this came forward to ensure that the palm oil element is not part of it. Pat, do you want to answer?
Okay, thanks. Your first question that you asked about the cost per mile, etc., against the CO2, I would need to come back to you on that one. I don't have that at hand. In relation to the second point you were asking, sorry, what was it, the second question?
The second question was, there are 80 commercial vehicles listed in the table producing about approximately half the carbon dioxide, and I asked for this trial where we're running the fleet of a number of fleets of refuse collection vehicles, what proportion of that figure, are we going to make that reduction over? So is it 10 vehicles? Is it half the amount in the table, for example?
Okay, apologies for that then. Yeah, a third of the fleet, so a third of the 80 is what we would be initially moving to HVO with once the trial, if it's been successful. So that would reduce a third of the HGV fleet we'd be putting on to HVO. I think further down the line, the thought process would be to move all of the HGV fleet onto HVO fuel, assuming that everything has worked in accordance with the kind of thoughts and plans. As for the HVO fuel itself, it's accredited from our fuel provider. That comes from Scottish Fuels, and they currently deliver our own diesel to the different depots, and they provide certification that it's a green fuel. If it wasn't a green fuel, we wouldn't be able to claim the CO2 savings that is being suggested in the report. So I do have a degree of comfort from the fuel provider that it is a green fuel that we are using.
Thank you. It's just, you mentioned a third of the vehicles. Is that a third of the carbon target? That would be helpful. Thanks.
The report mentions specifically the refuse collection fleet, and the carbon reductions in that would be 725 tonnes for that fleet itself.
Thank you. David, you have a question?
Can I start by saying thank you to the officers for producing a concise and succinct report of 8 pages. I'm very glad to see that, so thank you for that. I like to think as the road to global net zero is like building a active travel route around the perimeter of the globe, and that's round about 40,000 kilometres. And the UK are responsible for around about 1% of those emissions, which makes it, we'd be responsible for building 400k of active travel route. And Perth and Kinross, roughly 1/4%, so that leaves us with 1 kilometre of that active travel route around the globe. And Perth and Kinross, yeah, I'm coming. And then that leaves a kilometre for Perth and Kinross as a whole. And the council only responsible for about 3% of that kilometre, which is about 30 metres. And this 6% of that 30 metres.
David, you're not. I don't think you're getting to a question.
Okay, it's coming.
Making quite a long statement. Can you please get to your point?
Yeah, the point I'm making is the impact here is 6.7% of our carbon footprint. Are there easier ways of achieving that, given the substantial challenges that the officers have brought forward to this committee?
There's no easy way to net zero, and there's no magic fix to get to net zero, and it is dealing with the 1% at a time to try and get there, whether that's us as a council leading by example or within our individual lives and choices that we make. So and I am a wee bit uncomfortable with this analogy that we are just a teeny wee part of the challenges ahead to get to net zero. And I'm not sure quite what your conclusion of that was in your statement, but I do feel quite uncomfortable about it. We do need to do what we can do within the limited resources we've got to make the maximum amount of difference from a CO2. And you know, one of our main aims as a council is to provide a better area, a better planet for future generations, and that's one of the keys in what we're trying to achieve. Thank you.
The question is, are there easier ways of achieving this CO2 saving, given the substantial challenges that have been mentioned by the officers?
Barbara's going to come in.
I think, while I understand the question, I think that the council has made a huge commitment to climate change and sustainability. In terms of and I was just trying to find the climate change strategy, but a big part of the climate change strategy is looking at our fleet decarbonisation. I think it's a moot point. It could be argued, Councillor Illingworth, in terms of whether there are other areas to do that in or not, but there is a commitment that the council has taken. The council has signed up to a number of charters to support climate change and sustainability and biodiversity, and I think that this is one strand of that.
Grant, do you want a point of clarification?
Point of clarification is this isn't the only strand we're doing it. We've got a decarbonisation of our buildings, we've got decarbonisation of everything, and it's every resident and everybody across the globe to do everything they possibly can to get to the targets that are set. It's strange that someone is a member of the climate change and sustainability, not asking a question, but making a statement, says, oh, we're too small, we're too wee, let's no bother doing anything.
Thank you.
The question, the point of clarity was, there are many strands, including the way we travel around, the way we deliver our services, our buildings, the way we create green energy, etc. That's not one strand.
Thank you. Right.
Yes, Councillor Lang, you're correct. And one of the other issues, not to put too fine a point on it, is about awareness raising with our communities and making sure that every member of our community understands that there are opportunities for a single person and a community and a council to make a difference to climate change, and that's part of the strategy.
Yes, I think you're correct. I think many more people across Perth and Kinross are becoming aware of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Cuthbert, you have four questions. Can we do just one at a time? I've got quite a few people coming back with second questions.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first one, I can lump the three of them together because they're financial, and we've now determined we're not really making a financial decision here. My first question relates to the HVO trial. Given that we're in good communications with other councils, my question is, are other councils further ahead of us? Have they trialled it without any problems? And if so, could we not actually implement it immediately so that, I mean, this is a crisis, a climate change crisis that we're in. My kids all see it that way. Could we not just do it across the whole board straight away?
Pat is definitely the person to ask on this because he's already been involved in this. There are other councils doing it both in England and in Scotland and doing it successfully. And my opinion is we probably could, but I think the idea of the trial and largely based on part of Andrew's question is we have a geography that can be different from other councils, and it's just to flag up any issues that are potentially there. But I think and I'll let Pat come in here in a second. But if there's no issues, then we can just roll straight ahead with it. But it's almost just in my eyes, a verification or I just let's just roll this out initially quite slowly, and then we will gear up very quickly, as long as expected there are no issues raised. Pat, anything?
I don't really have anything further to mention in relation to that, Convener. You've covered all the points, and I do have experience in relation to the HVO fuel by introducing it in Falkirk Council successfully. So I would be hoping that it would just be exactly the same transition. However, just as the Convener has pointed out, I do have some hesitation in relation to the geography of the area, and just to make sure that everything is okay with that as well.
I was going to come back and possibly suggest that we change this from being a 3-month trial to being a trial, and once established it's working, to actually implement immediately rather than 3-month time bound. But we can come to that with the amendments if need be.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, do you have another question, or was that part of the point of clarification?
I do, Convener, and I'm sorry, I'm going to go back to where I was before because I'm still slightly confused by the process here. I think I know you like specific questions, so if we agree this today, the officer's recommendation, is there the likelihood that some purchasing will be done on the back of that agreement? In other words, will we spend council money based on our decision today?
Fraser, do you want to come in and answer that? Or Mark?
So again, I think we need to establish what those costs are and seek authority from the appropriate committee, be that FNR or full council. Finance and Resources Committee once a quarter, so we can move on that quite quickly if required.
Can we let Mark come in first and then come back to you? Is that okay?
Yeah,
Mark?
thanks, Convener. As Fraser said, what we're doing today is we're asking committee to agree the strategy, the policy, the direction of travel. This is what we want to do, which is in line with the wider climate change action plan and commitments that the council's made. This will cost, electric vehicles cost more, between 25%, 40% more. So there will be a financial commitment needed or additional money needed to deliver this strategy. And I think, as Fraser's pointed out, that will be a decision for another committee, similar to very much when the committee agreed its plans around climate change. It is difficult to quantify them. They will cost more money, and that's for a decision in another place. But today it's very much about agreeing the strategy. This is what the committee would like the officers to progress, but obviously we'll need to go to members of another committee to get the money to deliver it. Hopefully that's clear. Thanks.
Angus.
Yeah, thanks for that. I'm getting some clarity now. So I'm grateful for both Fraser and Mark for that. So just to kind of knock this one on the head. So can I get an assurance then that we were not, what we decide today, if we decide with the officer's recommendation, we're not going to actually spend any council money, that decision will be taken at some other committee meeting at some other time, and the members of that committee will still have the authority to say, do you know what, guys, the cost to doing this is massive and the benefit is negligible, let's not go there. Is that decision still open to whoever's on that committee at that time?
As with any committee, I assume we're going to let Barbara come in here.
Thank you, Convener. The report outlines that we are taking a cautious approach to this. We had the option, which is presented to you, of doing this across a 2 to 3 year period. What officers are recommending, it's a 5-year transition period, because we believe that it's the most cost-effective way of doing it. It allows us to use the vehicles that we currently have to the end of their best life before we dispose of them, while we are still looking at the cost, the technology, the charging arrangements for all of that. So as part of that, we will be ongoing looking at the capital budget, looking at the costs associated for all of that, and that will then form part of a finance and resources paper and information within a finance and resources capital update paper, or form part at some point of a budget proposal. Council approved a corporate asset management strategy 2-3 weeks ago, and within that, fleet is part of that as well. So that all then ties up to, we are trying to make the best use of our fleet in line with the agreed approach that we've got through the climate change strategy. So all of that at some point would need a decision, a financial decision.
Yes, you can come back. Angus, go for it.
Sorry, Barbara, was that a yes?
In line with what the council has already agreed, and in line with the principles that we already have set out through the corporate asset management strategy and the approach that we take to budget setting and financial reporting. So yes, but we need a direction set here. What we're asking for is a 5-year transition process, so that we can do that working, that we can report back to council about the effectiveness of all of this, but we need to set that, and that's why we've gone for a very safe way of doing it, so we protect the council's funding and our assets as much as we can.
Thank you, Barbara.
Just for clarity, Barbara, can you say that this has already been passed through the strategy through council, and this is part of the strategy that comes to this committee to be further investigated, to form part of the strategy that then will be going back. We've all asked for this already. So, and if it does come back and people decide that the climate situation is very worthwhile doing, taking the opposite position from Councillor Forrest says that some people might do, and they think it's very important that we do everything we can to help in this situation, that would also be another choice when it comes to finance and resources.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dave, you have another three questions. Go for it.
Thank you, Convener. They're all related to finance, so I'll do them all at once, because it's really to say that when this comes to F&R, presumably, there's aspects of it that I'd like clarification. So under 4.10, for example, on page 11, it says that there is no funding available to support all of the council's requirements. So what I would like to know is what funding is available, rather than there is, that's a bit of a confused statement. So there needs to be clarity about what funding will be available to help fund what we're proposing here. The next thing is that, as been mentioned by Councillor Welch about the running costs of electric vehicles versus petrol and diesel, I think we also need to understand the depreciation. My understanding is that the second-hand value on EV vehicles is much lower. They don't hold the same value, because if the battery gets damaged, then people don't want to buy them because there's a danger of fire. So I think that's something that we need to understand, and whether we can use this opportunity to get feedback on that, that'd be good. The other thing is the cost of capital. I think one of the things we've tended not to look at is what the cost of the investment. So if we were to take, I think it was option one, it was going to cost 8 million. That would have a £500,000 a year impact on the revenue account. So if you like, I've got my BRG hat on. Whether officers can answer any of these questions, like the energy saving trust, the depreciation rates, or the cost of capital of what's been proposed in this particular option, I'd welcome an answer. But if not, then it can come to the F&I when it comes.
Thank you. Do we have answers for these, or are these all waiting? These are all waiting for the financial side, the financial paper and the detail to come before, which will look at all these issues as far as funding available. It's Mark. Mark, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Convener. I just want to clarify. We have done very, very detailed costings on all the different vehicles, and we do things on whole life costing as well. So it takes into account the running costs, the maintenance costs, the capital costs. We did that with Urban Foresight, who Pat referred to earlier, but that work we did probably about 12 months ago, and it's a very fluid situation. The vehicle prices change quickly, interest rates change, everything changes. You know, fuel prices have changed. So I don't want members to feel that we've just came into this blindly without doing some of the background. It just wouldn't be helpful to have refer to that work today, because it's out of date and it's fluid. So we can provide that information. We will update that information for when it comes to F&R or to members again. And I can assure Councillor Cuthbert and the rest of the committee, it's full life costing. So it's not just the purchase, it is the maintenance, it is the fuel, it's all those other things as well. So I can certainly reassure members that we've done that work. We just need to update it, and we will provide that to members next time.
Thank you, Mark. Barbara?
And we already have a vehicle replacement programme within the capital budget as well. So we would be using that funding to be able to support the implementation of this. It's not as necessarily that it's going to be an entirely new ask of council through a budget process. What we need to do is, as we already do, is manage the fleet to make sure, as I've already said, that we get the best use of the fleet that we have before we dispose of it, and we make the best use of that capital funding that we've got.
Thank you. Thank you, Barbara. Grant, you have a question? Grant Stewart, sorry, I just see Grant come up on my screen. Apologies, Grant Stewart.
Thank you, Convener. My question is about the HVO fuel. And I think it was mentioned earlier about the council having a safe approach, but I wonder, is the HVO fuel a considered approach rather than a safe approach? But my question is, where is the carbon saving by using HVO?
Pat, do you want to come in with the technical element of that?
Okay, currently the CO2 is based upon the use of diesel within the vehicles. By moving to HVO fuel would allow us to make the savings, because the way that the HVO fuel is actually manufactured, it has less pollutants within it, and therefore you've got less pollutants going into the vehicle. Now, the example that I provided in the report was around the use of one RCV, one refuse collection vehicle, and how that would emit around 31 tonnes per year. And if we can make the savings of up to 90% of that, it would mean that RCV would only emit 3.1 tonnes per year. So there is a significant saving to be had within it, but it's to do with the way that the HVO fuel is manufactured.
Please come back, Grant.
Am I right in thinking that when cooking fats, fuels are collected, that a lot of these are from sustainable sources?
Yeah, that's correct. They are, and that's why we need the certification from the fuel provider to ensure that the HVO fuel they're providing has come from a sustainable source in the first instance.
An important element. Do we have any further questions on this report? I'll move the report. This report seeks our approval of the fleet decarbonisation update for Perth and Kinross Council. We have a duty to progress the work already started within the Council to further reduce our CO2 emissions in line with the Scottish Government and the Council's commitments towards net zero. We have to find the right balance between achieving our CO2 reduction targets and ensuring that the options we move forward with allow us to utilise technology that is proven and reliable and that will always also provide a cost-effective solution. These recommendations will provide a significant step forward in decarbonising the fleet overall with a pragmatic and measured approach, and in doing so should lead to around a 50% reduction in our overall CO2 emissions. The recommendation to introduce hydrotreated vegetable oil, HVO, as an alternative to diesel within the Council's refuse collection vehicles without the need for a significant capital investment will lead to an estimated CO2 saving of 725 tonnes per year, providing an immediate and considerable step forward in driving down the Council's carbon footprint generated by its larger fleet vehicles. I welcome the opportunity to follow progress of the fleet journey and would like to thank officers for providing the detail to enable the implementation of this ambitious plan. I look forward to further report later this year, which will provide an overview of the financial position. I am happy to accept the recommendations within the report and move the paper for approval. Can I ask Councillor Liz Barrett to second the report?
I'm happy to formally second the report. Thank you.
Angus, a point of clarification.
Yeah, just convener, just to pick up on a small thing. Did you just say that this would reduce our overall emissions by 50%, or did I mishear what you just said?
Sorry. The stage of the report will almost get to once the recommendations in here with the under 3.5 tonne and the HVO stuff. If you add them both together, you're very slightly under 50% carbon. I am right with my sums here, haven't I, Pat? Pat's nodding at me, so I am right with my sums. Yes. So it's the implementation of the strategic elements that we are deciding within the report will lead to just to that amount of saving, which is quite considerable.
I totally agree, convener. I think what you said was 50% of our overall emissions, and I think what Mark's clarified is 50% of our fleet emissions. I was just wanting to clarify that was correct.
The paragraph in the sentence I was saying it was talking about our fleet, fleet emissions. I will defend myself.
No, it's fine. That's okay. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Do we have any comments? Amendment. Councillor Cuthbert.
Yeah, thank you, convener. I mentioned earlier on, my feeling is that rather than set a time for the HVO trial, that we instruct officers to carry out the trial as quickly as possible and to implement immediately should it prove successful, rather than setting a 3-month time on it.
I agree. I agree with the sentiments absolutely, and I'm just wanting to come to Pat first to see
if I can just clarify, the recommendation within the report is that we're asking for a 3-month trial period, and if that is successful, we just move to that to HVO for everything, for all our heavies, as soon as possible. But the 3-month is an officer-based recommendation on experience, and as Pat has already said, that we just want to check, and as the convener said, we just want to check that it is possible given the geography. But the plan is that we won't come back to committee. We're not going to come back for approval. If it works, we're just going to move as quickly as we can. Because my understanding of it is you just drain the diesel out. Keep looking at Pat for this. You drain the diesel out, you replace it, and then it's good to go effectively. So that's the approach.
Yeah, it's just a safeguarding kind of approach rather than.
Yeah.
Did you want to? Are you okay with the commitment that we will as soon as officers are comfortable with the issues around the geography and everything, that we move as soon as possible?
I am comfortable with that. I think it's the message that we're sending out that we want to do things as quickly as possible. I think there is a crisis out there and we should be acting as if there is a crisis.
Absolutely.
Yes, I'm happy to withdraw the amendment.
Thank you, Dave. Thank you. Jack, you have a point of clarification?
Yeah, it's just to understand that essentially what we're saying here is that 50% of the HG, the above 3.5 ton fleet that we're going to use for this trial, and that if the trial is successful, then effectively we'll be using that fuel on an ongoing basis for that 50%, or are there plans to extend that to all of the above 3.5 ton fleet?
I think Pat answered the question earlier, where it will move out to all the refuse collection vehicles as soon as, and then officers will start looking at the rest of the larger HGV type fleet, and then they'll have a look into it and see if we can roll that even further, which will obviously create an even bigger carbon footprint saving. So I think let's do that initial safety trial, then let's get all the refuse collection up, and then officers will try and progress at a faster rate, the bigger one. And Pat's nodding at me, so that sounds good. Grant, you have a comment?
Thanks for that. I think it's a very important paper. I think it's the correct thing to do moving forward, and it being part of the whole strand that we are doing. We're very fortunate to have Pat here coming from a local authority that's already used this, so welcome. And at Perth and Kinross, I hope you're enjoying your first committee in a pleasant way. So I think I was speaking to Councillor Cuthbert there, from a background of actually having to work with diesel vehicles and everything like that. You don't want to do something too quickly till you find out the effects. And our topography and running the diesel vehicles, it might find that it doesn't work as well, or there is an issue, hopefully not. So I think 3 months is a pragmatic and sensible way to do. Also, you don't want to have to send the diesel back that you've already paid for, so it's pragmatic to save money to use it up over the period. So I think it's a sensible approach, and I'm really happy to hear that it's not as strict as it seemed when it was first described, of up to 30 before we start looking at hydrogen or other vehicles. So I welcome the report, and I'm really pleased to see it come here today.
Thank you. Angus, you have a comment?
Thanks for that. The HVO stuff, I'm absolutely delighted with, and would support an amendment to just crack on. But we have experts in the room, and let's let them get on with what they know best, and they know better than us. The smaller scale stuff, I think you probably have grasped that I'm a bit uncomfortable with this we'll push on with it because, you know, I think that's the right thing to do. We do have a climate emergency. I've absolutely no doubt about that at all. And we have to do, as you said, every little bit to make a difference. But, you know, we're all in budget review process. We do have a financial emergency as well. And I would have been a lot happier to be able to compare the cost of doing this against the amount of reduction carbon, especially now that Mark said that information is albeit out of date, but is available. I would have been happier to see that in the report, but I'm satisfied with the answers I've had, particularly from Barbara, about the next stage of where we go with this. You know, I want to be clear, I support the principle, I support the direction of travel, but I would have been a lot happier to be able to look at the financial aspect in more detail than we've been able to do today.
Thank you, Angus. David?
Thank you, Convener. I absolutely accept the principle that as a globe, we need to reduce our carbon footprint substantially, or get it down to zero, in fact. But I am slightly concerned that we may be moving too quickly. I'd like to see that every step of the way, given that Mr. Taggart specifically said there are substantial challenges with this approach, I'd like to see hard evidence that it's working at every step of the way before we move with it. Thank you.
I'm not sure Mr. Taggart did say that. I thought the small fleet stuff, it said we were quite comfortable with the technology and where it was. I think the challenges really are financially, you know, in a tightening budget within the council. That's the real challenge, I think, going forward for the small fleets, for the under 3.5 ton stuff. But thank you for your comment.
Mr. Taggart did say substantial challenges.
And Jack?
My only comment would be that essentially the electrification of transport, the decarbonisation of transport and the electrification of heat, which is all part of a very important element of this committee, is actually a real economic opportunity for growth, for investment, for new jobs, for cleaning up our city environment, for reducing impact on health through, for example, lung cancer. And I really do struggle a bit when I see the lack of ambition of some of the committee members in that respect. Thank goodness we're not debating tens of years ago moving from a horse and cart to a modern car. Otherwise, we could be still on horses and traps. Thank you.
Do we have any further comments on this report? Okay, that's we've accepted the report. Can I just pass over to Councillor Liz Barrett, who will take item 5 on the paper. Thank you everyone for the debate. Sorry. Can we have a small 5-minute comfort break before? Is that enough?
Thank you, Convener. Welcome back. The next paper is on the Sustainable Development Performance Update, and I'd like to ask Angela Harris, the Sustainable Development Officer, to please introduce the report. Angela will also provide us with a demonstration of the digital platform, which is available on the PKC website with links from the report. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'll just give a very brief introduction to the report, and then we'll go through a quick demonstration as well. The Council has a duty under Best Value to contribute to the achievement of sustainable development. This report provides an update from the Sustainable Development Performance Report approved by this committee last February, where key areas of focus were identified for the period 2023 to 24. The report demonstrates our performance in contributing to and delivering sustainable development through our processes and practices in line with Best Value guidance, and provides an update on action taken towards the key areas of focus outlined in last year's report as detailed in Appendix 1. In particular, the report draws attention to 2 key areas of focus. The first being the development and initial rollout of the Impact and Value Assessment tool, to screen and assess all council proposals against a range of statutory and non-statutory sustainable development criteria, including climate change, sustainable procurement, equality and fairness, child rights and wellbeing, and strategic environmental assessment. The second key area of focus relates to a newly developed and publicly available online platform to show our progress towards the internationally approved United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. This quality of life dashboard builds on our existing indicator set, previously developed in accordance with best value requirements. A summary of current progress towards each of the 17 goals is presented in Appendix 2. The Council continues to make steady progress in its contribution to achieving sustainable development and also recognises that work still needs to be done to fully implement both the impact and value assessment tool and the quality of life platform to maximise our contribution. Work to achieve both of these is underway. So today we ask that the recommendations to note the updated performance position in compliance with the Council's best value sustainable development duty and the updated contribution Perth and Kinross is making towards the UN Sustainable Development Goals are both supported, and that approval is given to this latest Sustainable Development Performance Report. Thank you. Now I'm just going to go through a quick demo. I'll just share my screen with you, and can everybody see the screen? Can everybody see the screen? Yes, okay, right, I'll do that again. Share this window. Share. Right. Okay, so the quality of life dashboard is positioned on the Council's website under the Sustainable Development pages, and it updates on our previous approach, which was quite a few PDF files with information where people had to click down quite a lot to get relevant information they wanted, and it was a very difficult approach as well to be able to look at 2 indicators together or look across the 17 goals. So what we've done is create a dashboard which we hope will be much more intuitive and a lot easier for people to use. So if we click the link there, so it's a Power BI hosted platform, and it's based around the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And what we can do is to begin navigating, we just need to click one of the goals. So we'll just click number 1, no poverty. And each of these 17 goals has a main page and then some indicator pages which sit alongside it. So the main page just gives us a very brief introduction to what we mean when we say end poverty in all its forms everywhere and no poverty. And then we look at how we contribute to this goal. So as an organisation, we contribute to all of the 17 goals, but some of them are more relevant than others. And in particular, obviously, with no poverty, this is a key priority for us in terms of our corporate plan and our community plan. So what we've done with each of the goals is to look through and say, well, how do we contribute through different services? Because it's not just a fixed service issue. Each of the goals and the goals as a whole really are interconnected. So I think it's really important to say this is all the different type of work that we're doing that contributes to achieving this goal. This section here, not all targets linked to the UN goals are relevant for local authorities. So, we don't have target 1.3 here, but the targets that are relevant, we've linked through. This is direct link to the UN site. So you're able to see what the targets are and also the indicators that are recommended that sit below those targets. Where possible, we've tried to replicate those indicators from our existing indicator set or with new indicators. And as new information comes online all the time, then we can add as appropriate. So the section here, we try and update on how we're progressing at the moment towards this goal. It's just to give an idea of where we are at this snapshot at this moment in time. So we can see here every indicator that we use up here to assess how we're progressing. We've given a very, very brief description here. So it's, it's saying this is where we are now, this is the trend, and where possible, this is how we're doing in comparison to the average across Scotland. So when we gather all our indicators together, we have a system where we, depending on the trend and the what's happening at the moment and how we are to the average across Scotland, we can give it a score. So -4 would be very bad, no progress, and actually worsening, and then +4 would be very good progress and showing improvement. And then with those scores, we take an average from all the indicators, we add them together, and then we can assign a percentage to it to give us an indication of our progress. So at the moment, with no poverty, SDG 1, we've got progress from the indicators, which is around 63%. So here we have just taken some of the key indicators from this Sustainable Development Goal. Many of the goals have many indicators, so it's quite difficult to get them all on the first page. So not all of them are on the first page, but all the indicators are represented in the pages that sit behind the main menu for that goal. So here we have the up-to-date information, and it gives you the source, so we know where our data is coming from. It's all verified data. Most of our data is from national sources, so Office for National Statistics, government statistics, Scottish Household Survey, CEPA, NatureScot. So it's all good quality data, and people can link straight through to the data source here if they want to view it in its sort of original form. So this is the main page. Then we have the indicators that sit behind it that give us a position of where we are. So here we have used 4 different indicators for employment and income poverty, and each indicator has an information icon to really tell us just very briefly what we're talking about, what we mean by this indicator, because for a lot of people, the language isn't that obvious. So it's just to give people an idea of what we mean, and let them see how we're doing. And again, the data source is listed. And next we have just a summary on the latest position. So, this is where we are in 2021 for workless households. 10.3% of households in Perth and Kinross were identified as workless, well below the average across Scotland. And if you hover over the data, you'll see the 10.3 there. So it's just the information is there, hopefully in a very usable form for people to look at. And again, housing poverty indicators, we have 4 there. So these 2 sheets together make up what is our assessment of where we are with SDG 1 at the moment. So that's really how it works in terms of the indicators, the separate indicators. You can go to the home page, we can look at another one. If we look here, you can see that some of the indicators use indicator sets across, some of the goals use indicator sets across different goals. So for example here, while it's quite a specific goal and what it means for the council and what we're doing, our council and partners, the River Tay catchment area indicators, we've got protected nature sites which are water dependent, but also related is surface water condition, which is a key indicator set for SDG 6. So while it sits under SDG 6, it's actually used to form our opinion of SDG 14 as well. So it's just really to press home the fact that sustainable development is about interconnections, and it's looking at different topics together and seeing what information we can get from them. So that's where we are at the moment. And now it's established, what we hope to do this year is to make the information better. And so that means less clicks and more interactive and more relevant for local people. At the moment, you can see here we've got by condition, we've got 3 different graphs by condition. What we'll be doing in the future is we'll have one chart and there'll be a scroll down menu and you can view them together or you can view one. And this goes right across the goals and the indicators. And then with time as well, we don't have a lot of local level data at the moment. It's just nationally available. It's not really there. But I think as more and more organisations start using platforms like Power BI, I think that level will be produced by the national organisation. So hopefully we'll be able to get some really good low level data that local people will be able to look at. And then if we can do that, we'd also look to put in some GIS mapping as well. So it's really relevant for people to say what's happening in my area with this sustainable development goal. So that's where we are at the moment, really. I'll stop sharing my screen. Yes. Thank you.
Angela, thank you very much for that. Can I ask, do members have any questions on the report? I see a question from Angus. Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thanks, Angela. I had a look at that website. I really like the stuff actually, because I'm quite geeky and I'm quite analytical. But I accept, and I'm sure some of my colleagues to my left will agree with what I'm about to say, I'm not particularly normal in that regard. So I'm just wondering, do you expect many people from Perth and Kinross to look at that? I mean, it's great that it's there. It's great that we have access to it, but what's it actually going to do for average people in the community?
I mean, I think our reason for developing it really, first and foremost is because we have the duty under Best Value for sustainable development. So we have a duty to display indicators and report on our performance. So it's there. It's there for colleagues to use, and colleagues in different organisations as well. But hopefully, in time, yes, I think it will be really good in terms of just giving a general feel for the area. So we can work with on maybe on specific topics, or when there's things like MPF4, or when people have to engage, I guess it's there for people to use in that way.
Yeah, thanks for that. Do you have intentions to monitor traffic to that particular web page, and would you ever report back on the usage of it?
Do. Yeah, we can do. It's not. I haven't set it up at the moment, but that's it's definitely something we can do, because the link is on the council website, so it's easily monitored, and we can report back.
Thank you, Angela. A question from Councillor Kigali on some of the data. Councillor Kigali, just to remind you, that was a demonstration of the dashboard, but if your question's about data in the report, please go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, yeah, no, it's a question on data in the report. I don't know whether you want to leave that until later. Do you want me to go ahead now?
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, just in regards to something that was in the affordable and clean energy section, and it indicates that total renewable generation in P&K has gone down, but capacity by source and etc. is essentially the same. I was just wondering why that is. Do we know, is that purely environmental and less sun, less wind potentially, or is there something else that's causing that?
It does give you the it should give you a breakdown of the different sources in the indicator. I'm sorry, I don't have it up, so I can't see it at the moment. But I can get back to you. I can have a look through it and get back to you on that one, because it is broken down by sources.
Thank you, Angela. Is that okay, Councillor Kigali?
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Ling has a question.
Yeah, and this is probably a daft laddie question because I've not really been aware of this. And I wouldn't say that Councillor Forbes is more geeky or he's interested in data, which we should all be. So this is I think an important tool. How widely advertised is this going to be? Because I think it would help businesses, who want to invest here, businesses, etc., who already are in Perth and Kinross, and it'll also help third sector and and others. It would be especially useful for both officers of the council and elected members to see where we're going and to see where there's a problem. We'd highlight it. So I think it's a really useful thing. We've said, all of us within the council in this term, on all sides of the chamber, have said that because of the financial situation, etc., all decisions have to be driven by data and information. So it is a really important tool. But I'm wondering how widely advertised it is through media, or is it hidden away in the council website and you have to find a link for it?
At the moment, it's on the council website, but we do have a communications plan for it. So we're going to roll it out now that it's established. We're going to do lots of internal communications as well, but we'll also do external communications, with the different sectors. So it would be really good to get an idea, where to target, and if there's anything we haven't thought of, then that'd be really useful.
Yeah, I think it is very, very useful, a really useful tool, and I'm glad to see it. My question would be: will it be able to be adapted if a partner or somebody else highlights an area that could be included in it? Does
Absolutely.
it have the capacity
Yeah.
to be added?
Yeah, absolutely. We can add it. We can adapt it because we've got the initial model. So as long as my skills are up to it, we can adapt it for that purpose. We can run different sections in it even. So that there could be a third sector section if you like. So you can section it off to how you want it. To suit your purposes best.
Thanks.
Thank you. I think Barbara has something to add on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Convener. We were always keen just to bring this here to committee, to allow committee to have a look at it, an understanding of that. And the plan had then always been to promote that widely, and as Angela says, both internally within the organisation, because there's a lot of information within that for officers and for elected members, but then to promote this widely across the whole of Perth and Kinross for communities, for businesses and for interested people. But actually some of that data will be of interest beyond the boundaries of Perth and Kinross as well. So we will do all we can to make sure that people are aware of that information.
Thank you, Barbara. And a question from Councillor Cuthbert.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm slightly confused. The quality of life dashboard, is that live data and accurate data, or is it sample data? Because I was a bit confused by what you said earlier.
It's the most up-to-date data we have from the verified sources, so from SEPA or the Scottish Government. So some of it is updated as soon as that data comes out from those sources, but most of it is manually updated at the moment because there simply isn't the technology used by many of the organisations that we get the data from to allow us to the model to update it itself. So at the moment it's national data that's out there, and we update it as much as we can. Have updated it since this report was produced, and we have some more updates to run on the business information. So I think that's SDG 8 and 9. So we have some more to do on that over the next couple of weeks. Did that answer your question?
It did, yes. I'm just wondering, do you want some comments on the website itself, or is that for another occasion?
I'm happy to take.
I think the purpose of the report was really, sort of to allow members to see it before we do a proper formal launch, but equally, sort of the main focus of the report is really in terms of the sustainable development performance update.
Can I just make one comment? The first page is very small. You can't actually see what all the different buttons are.
Okay, the introductory page.
Yes, the home page.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Cuthbert. If there are no further questions, can I move the report? I'd first like to say many thanks to Angela for presenting the report and demonstrating the very comprehensive dashboard to us. It's really useful having the source of data along the bottom of each page as well. Thank you also to all the teams for the very significant work that lies behind the report and the progress that has been made. This report seeks our approval of the annual Sustainable Development Performance Update for Perth and Kinross Council. As Angela explained, we have a duty to report progress towards delivering sustainable development as part of best value requirements, and the submission of this report fulfills that duty. It is imperative that the contents of this report are taken into consideration as they illustrate the Council's performance and steady progress in delivering sustainable development throughout the organisation and our progress in contributing to the 2030 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. As part of the approval of last year's Sustainable Development Performance Report, key areas of focus for 2023-24 were proposed. One area of focus was the development and implementation of the Impact and Value Assessment tool to screen strategies, plans and policies for sustainable development impacts. The tool was launched in May 2023 and is now being used to screen all proposals seeking committee approval. The tool will promote improvement across the 4 best value sustainable development criteria and provide effective evidence of the Council's compliance with the best value duty. A second area of focus was the development of a digital indicator platform to further demonstrate the impact of sustainable development in relation to key economic, social and environmental issues. And as you've seen this morning, the Quality of Life dashboard's been developed and is now available for public viewing via the Council's website. This further demonstrates our progress in contributing to the 2030 UN Sustainable Development Goals. We're committed to continuing to successfully work with our residents, businesses, communities and stakeholders to develop these goals, and to deliver these goals. And I'm happy to accept the recommendations within the report and move the paper for approval. Can I please ask Councillor Waters to second the report?
Happy to formally second the report.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Do any members have comments on the report? If there are no comments, Deputy Provost Parrott.
Thank you very much, Vice Convener. I certainly welcome this report and the wealth of data that is going to be available for examination. I just want to make one comment about the that sort of summary half circle that goes with each of the particular areas, and is reinforced with words. That to me is less clear than it might be, and to me, a numerical value was stated as being what it was based on. To me, it would be better if that numerical value was actually expressed each time, and actually the numerical values at previous points of measurement, so that actually you get an impression of progress, hopefully, or otherwise if not. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Parrott. If Angela could just consider whether these comments could be taken on board when you're reviewing how it works. Thank you. Oops. Comment from Councillor Ling.
Thanks, Vice Convener. No, I welcome this initiative and this moving forward. What we think that hopefully Angela will agree is that once it goes out wider, it will be refined. This is just the start. The start of it, and I think any elected members or that have now. We'll be able to find Angela on Teams now. We know exactly who she is, which will make her life probably less pleasant than it is at the moment. But that's the way something will be refined. So I'm not so concerned about, I understand Councillor Cuthbert saying it's too small, that can be fed back, and Councillor Parrott's comment about the circle showing, I don't know if it was actually just a circle, or it was actually in scale, to each one. So I think all these things will be refined, but as a source of information to help us make decisions and others make decisions, I really welcome it. And I'd like to thank Angela for the work she's done on bringing it to this stage, and I'm sure it'll be refined and spread out further in the near future. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Ling. Councillor Illingworth has a comment.
Thank you. Welcome all this geeky sort of data. I've just tried clicking into, and you have to put a request in to the system, something BI request, and maybe I'm clicking on the wrong place. I'll take it up with Angela. I'll see.
Yeah, I think maybe persevere, because I think most members have managed to click into it when they've tried. So thank you. So if there are no further comments on the report, can we agree the recommendations in the report, please? Thank you very much. Just pass you back to the convener.
Thank you, Liz. Just thanks everybody for their contributions to the debates. Just before we close, this is Barbara's last CCNS. You knew this was coming, didn't you? This is Barbara's last CCNS Climate Change and Sustainability Committee. I will be brief, I promise. Just want to, take the opportunity to thank her for all her guidance and support with me as a convener. But I think on behalf of the committee, just for all the guidance that she's done, both sitting at this top table and behind the scenes, as we've dealt with a lot of our climate change issues throughout the council, and really appreciate it. And I'm sure you'll be missed, but I'm sure Fraser will step up adequately. But it's about you, and thank you, appreciate it, and all the best in your retirement.
With Barbara, it's a long goodbye, because she sits on that table in so many different guises that I think we could all, I'm sure Angus and that as well, who's worked with you closely, we all want to say something at some point, but I'm sure we'll all get the chance later on in the year to show our gratitude for what you've done and recount some stories we maybe had as well. I'm sure your members, because you've been here a couple of years, and so there might be a few stories. But thanks.
Thank you, everybody. That's everything covered. So can I just please formally close the meeting and wish everybody a good afternoon and evening. Cheers.